Today in our devotional, we talk about Jesus as the Lord of the covenant. Many people assume that Jesus is simply the Lord of the new covenant, but Jesus is the Lord of both the old and the new covenant. Everything in the old covenant, the patriarchs and the prophets, the priesthood, the temple, the sacrifices, all point to the person and work of Jesus Christ. The new covenant simply reminds us of the fulfillment, the great fulfillment of Jesus Christ as the one who initiates a new and better covenant and fulfills all of the promises of the old covenant. That's why when Jesus arrives to Jerusalem, where I happen to be standing within the old city walls, he comes with a message of condemnation. In Matthew 23, he pronounces 7 woes upon the scribes and the Pharisees. Why? Why 7 words of condemnation? Because it was the job of the scribes and the Pharisees to prepare God's people, God's covenant people. It was their job to shepherd their souls, to prepare them for the coming of the Messiah, to prepare them for the arrival of Jesus as the Messiah, as the one who would fulfill all of the demands and all of the promises of the old covenant, the one who would initiate a new and better covenant. And instead of preparing them, they had turned the temple into a den of thieves and robbers. Instead of honoring and listening to the prophets, they murdered the prophets. Instead of shepherding the people's souls and pointing them to the glory of God, they sought to build the temple and to lead the people in such a way that they got their own glory, and they sought their own glory. And that's why he pronounces a word of condemnation upon those that were called to shepherd the souls of the old covenant people. Eventually in Matthew 24, the next chapter, he foretells of the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. This is the result of a generation that is wicked, a generation that has disobeyed God and disobeyed their calling as the shepherds of the souls of the covenant people of God. But it's interesting, in foretelling of the destruction of the temple and the destruction of Jerusalem, Jesus is sending a message that a new and better temple is here. Jesus is sending the message that a better prophet, priest, and king is here. You see, the old covenant is not bad. It simply was pointing as a guidepost for the coming of the Messiah that will come to initiate a new and better covenant. The old covenant was temporary because it simply pointed to the work of Jesus Christ on the cross, his life, his death, and his resurrection. And by saying that the temple will be destroyed and Jerusalem will be destroyed, he is declaring that all of the temporary means of pointing to his salvation and pointing to his work are no longer necessary, that a new and better temple is here, that there's no more need for an earthly temple built by human hands. Now Jesus is the temple that gives us access to God continually. No more need for the annual sacrifice on the Day of Atonement, because his sacrifice on the cross was once and for all people who place their faith and trust in Jesus Christ. But I think we see also the heart of the Savior in the midst of these 2 passages. Actually, at the end of Matthew 23, when thinking about how the people of the Old Covenant had rejected the Savior, it says that Jesus comes to Jerusalem and he weeps over the city. You see, Jesus doesn't delight in the destruction of Jerusalem. He doesn't delight in the destruction of anything or anyone, but he weeps over it. And he longs for us in our hearts to always recognize that he is the one that is preeminent, that he is the Lord of both the old and new covenant. So may our hearts not be tempted to long for the things of this world, to long for the things that are temporary. I imagine that when we long for things that are lesser than Jesus, lesser than the Lord of the covenant, that he weeps over our lives as well. So may it be the tears of Jesus weeping over Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, and the tears of Jesus maybe weeping over our lives today, that would cause us to see the heart of the Savior and point us back to the one who answers all of the promises of God on our behalf, becoming the temple that is torn apart only to be raised on the 3rd day. And this is why Jesus is good news, that he is both the Lord of the old covenant and the new covenant, the Lord of the covenant.